Hello everyone and welcome to DutchGreyBeard. Since I started this channel, I've done about 14 reading experiences. 7 of those are about series and the other 6 are reviews of one book. Now, I've been reading The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan since January of 2023. I'm nearing the end, but in all that time I did only one dedicated video on this amazing series, which is kind of strange, as this is the series that got me back into reading fantasy. It's not that I don't love the books, I mean, they each deserve their own reading experience video, even the ones that are not my favorites. So it's about time I give some more attention to my reading experience of The Wheel of Time. I'll be reviewing the final 3 books in the series separately, starting today with The Gathering Storm. I will keep this video free of spoilers. When I started reading the series, inspired to pick up the books by the Amazon Prime show, I was going real fast. I read the prequel, New Spring, and the first 4 books in this series back to back within about 5 weeks. Then I slowed my pace to about 1 book a month because I wanted to read some other fantasy as well. After Path of Daggers and Winter's Heart, I slowed down even more. Between July and December I read only 2 books in The Wheel of Time. But this January I was able to shake off the feeling of slog that mainly came from The Path of Daggers and Crossroads of Twilight. I finally picked up The Gathering Storm on January 23 and I spent 2 weeks with the book. This is the first book that was published after Robert Jordan's passing in September of 2007, and it was mainly written by Sanderson. In his foreword, Sanderson says that Jordan left many notes, outlines, completed scenes, and dictated explanations. During his last weeks, Jordan dictated events for the final volume of the series, which was to be called A Memory of Light. Jordan had promised it would be a big book, but while working on it, Sanderson realized that it would be too big. So they split it up into 3 separate volumes. By the time Sanderson received the phone call from Harriet McDougall, Jordan's widow, he'd already published Elantris and his first Mistborn era, among some other titles. It is of course impossible to determine which words are from Jordan and which were written by Sanderson. But already at the 2nd page of this book I felt the difference in writing style. The prose is easier accessible than Mr. Jordan's prose, which at times could be pretty dense and complex. In short, it's more pleasant to read. From books 6 or 7, I got into the habit of taking a small break after each chapter, as if I had to reload my reading battery for the next chapter. That habit completely vanished while reading The Gathering Storm. More than once I found that I'd started reading a new chapter without even realizing it. I normally read about 4 to 5 books at the same time, and practically every time when I sat down to read, I picked up The Gathering Storm. The story had become so enthralling and exciting that I was very eager to continue reading it, just as it was during the first 7 parts of the series. Many of the scenes are interwoven with these sort of brief recaps without becoming an info dump. They are very soothing reminders of what happened before. The first 200 pages of the book mainly set the stage and prepare the reader for what's to come. It had been 4 years since the publication of Knife of Dreams. There is so much going on, and almost every scene moves the story fast forward without rushing things. Many threads that Jordan had kept dangling in the wind, teasing the reader in prolonging this dangling, are picked up in this book and tied to the other threads where they belong. I had to wait a long time, until page 324, for my favorite character, Matt Colton, to make his appearance, and Elaine stayed out of the picture entirely, to my disappointment. But most of the other main characters get lots of page time. Here again the pacing has picked up, and it is at times literally breathtaking to follow the impactful events that are happening. Especially Egwene and Rand go through so many motions that it is at times hard to keep up. It is beautiful and realistic to see how their characters develop and how their inner dialogue evolves from their relatively insignificant persons at the beginning to their massively important roles at this point in the story. All the doubt within Rand, the convictions that move back and forth, his way of dealing with this enormous responsibility that has been put on his shoulders, it is all very real, and it holds the reader captive. There are truly emotional and heart-wrenching chapters that I won't go into here. At the end of the chapters I realized that I'd hardly been breathing for some time. I really had to recover before moving on to the next chapter. When I say that the story moves forward at breakneck pace, that doesn't mean everything is action-packed. There are many subdued scenes with lots of wisdom and beauty. I particularly enjoyed the development Avienda goes through and her final lessons before moving on to the next stage of her life. This reminded me a little bit of how Pug, from Raymond E. Feist's Magician, is learning to become a black robe magician in Kelowon. Instead of meekly following the teachers, something else is required, and that something else is very refreshing. Even though I flew through the pages and I absolutely enjoyed the prose, the true poetry of Jordan seems to be less present. The fish metaphors Schwann uses, for instance, are not as strong as in previous books in this series. But I did find these two lines, which I suspect to be undiluted Jordan. This woman's smile made you want to count the knives on your belt and in your boot, just to make sure none of them had found their way into your back while you were distracted. Never a firm commitment. Every half offer came smeared liberally with goose grease for easy escape. Even at this 12th book in the series, the world building continues. The reasons behind the many differences between the women who can channel, the Aes Sedai, the Windfinders of the Sea People, the Kin, the Domani, those who are treated as pets by the Shan-Shan, and the Aiel Wise Ones, these differences become more clear. For instance, I understand better why the 3 oaths are so important to the Aes Sedai, and why the Shan-Shan color women who can channel. Yes, the Gathering Storm convincingly pulled me back in the wheel of time. There are many revelations, and the plot gradually moves towards the stage where the grand finale will be performed. The last chapter, Veins of Gold, is truly amazing and a highlight in prose that will stay with me for a long time. I have no doubt that I will finish the 2 remaining books very soon. I rate this book 95 out of 100. We are back into the high scores. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at DutchGreyBeard.